of recovery and regular check-ins. I woke up yesterday with an overwhelming sense of grief and sadness, knowing that codependency, chaos creating, controller fixing, compulsive sending, overeating, sugar addiction, as well as depression and anxiety are draining my strength, and I am wasting away inside. Today, I had planned to speak about step 2, where we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Yet when I paused and asked for direction, I was pointed to Psalm 31:10, which is what I've just spoken in qualifying my compulsions, dependencies, and state of mental health. Even though my listening prayer guided me to restore hope by meditating on Romans 15:13, which says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." I still could not shake off the many intrusive thoughts that were going through my mind. I felt hopeless instead of hopeful. This mental obsession caused me to lose focus, and I found myself unable to concentrate on even the smallest work-related tasks. I thought for sure I would need to go offline. It was painstakingly difficult to press through the day, minute by minute. I prayed an alternate version of the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to stop beating myself up for not doing things perfectly, the courage to forgive myself because I'm working on being better, and the wisdom to know that you already love me the way I am, but too much to leave me as I am. Then I was prompted to look more closely at my state of mind, specifically anxiety and depression. This is something I've recently become acutely aware of, how the change of season, menopause, and sugar affect my mood at this time of year. Generally, I can cope. This is a challenge I've had for over a decade now. So why was yesterday so different? At times, I will get migraines and sleep them off. What I forgot was that as much as I must avoid caffeine to decrease my risk of migraines, I must also avoid it as it directly opposes the actions of my antidepressants and mood stabilizers, therefore increasing the repetitive disturbing thoughts that my medications were trying to subdue. You may be wondering then, how do I end up here time and time again? Well, it would seem that I honor the desires of my flesh more than those of my heart and health. I have observed that my desire for caffeine and sugar increases when my chronic pain flares up. Fatigue, sensitivity to light, sound, and odor become unmanageable. Throw in a migraine, rainy days, a shift in atmospheric pressure along with the schemes of the enemy, and you have a perfect storm for disaster. Throw in an ounce of irritability, a pound of resentment, and a pinch of unbelief. Mix well, and you have the perfect recipe for defeat. This is where I've found myself very often in this past season. I know that this season of defeat, this spirit of defeat, is lying to me, but it is persistent and relentless. It wears me down, causing me to say, what the heck? It doesn't matter what I consume because I'm either already sick or will be sick. So to hell with it all. Then I go all out and overindulge, consuming what is not good for me, reinforcing the spirit of defeat, keeping me trapped in my compulsions and dependencies. Wow, what a reality check. How I would much rather sleep off a migraine than go through this kind of mental obsession. Better yet, I need to be seeking freedom and peace of mind. So that, time again, now I confess, means no more coffee or chocolat favori. Looking back now, despite spending a better part of Monday preparing for this message, I found myself staring at a blank page and a mountain of journals, daily readers, and books, not knowing what to share and where to start. Information overload set in, and my mind was bombarded with words, concepts, and stories, but I couldn't concentrate long enough to put together a sentence, let alone a message. Sure, I could pull some together from all right resources, perhaps Life Lab, Facing Heartbreak, a daily reader on food for thought for meditation of overeaters, Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, or a 12 and 12 from OA. Most importantly, though, I needed to go to God and to go to my Bible. After all, education and awareness on addiction is one of the many tools of recovery, particularly when it leads to a new awareness of my reckless behaviors. But what happens when I take an intellectual approach to an emotional problem? You got it. I find myself intellectualizing, a form of denial where I avoid emotional or personal awareness by analyzing, theorizing, or justifying. Time for another reality check. Yesterday, I realized that the root of this form of denial is that I unconsciously set out to stockpile information to prove to myself that I am not crazy, that what I think and believe matters and is of sound mind and accurate. Knowing that others believe what I believe somehow brings some reassurance. The 12-step and 12 traditions of OA tells us we can have a new response when we face a problem or a decision, whether it has to do with food, life, or with our own runaway thoughts. Instead of acting on impulse or operating at an unconscious level, like I do, we pause long enough to learn God's will. As a result, I'm now learning to trust God to take care of me and to take charge of my compulsions and dependencies. One day at a time, He proves His strength and power and love by giving me a daily reprieve from mental and sugar obsessions. Bit by bit, I turn over my will and my life as I become conscious that I am not in a position to control people, places, or things. As the trust builds, I experience increasing peace of mind, so refreshing. It's a new response to stress, fear, anxiety, and frustration, a desire to ask for help, to turn to God. This can start happening instead of my knee-jerking reaction to stuff myself with food, relationships, or things. Instead, I pray when I'm in distress, either out loud or on paper. Peace of mind returns and trust increases because I trust God, trust the process, and trust myself. When I take my mind off of my problems and fix my eyes on God, this can happen. With trust comes another day of freedom from the insanity of my compulsions and dependencies, and from the pain of living with myself. Not only my compulsions, but even the mental health struggles of depression and anxiety. Time for another reality check. As I continue to work my recovery and rely on God, I recognize that as I let go of my codependent behaviors, my personal life and professional life no longer align. The expectations, drama, chaos, controller, fixer, manager, excitement, adrenaline rush, busyness, and usefulness that fed and served me that fed and served me as an active codependent are now draining my strength, and I am wasting away from inside. Another obsessive mind trap that I often fall into is catastrophic thinking. As far back as I can remember, I've had this tendency to get easily irritable when things do not go as planned, more specifically when they don't go according to my plan. Last year, I used the Switch app developed by Dr. Carolyn Leaf to address some ongoing toxic thinking, rumination, and catastrophizing. Thoughts that at their root determine that I often overthink. I always look for the worst, wait for the other shoe to drop. And I believe that everything in life, people, places, and things are hard. My thought life has been one of grumbling and martyrdom. But why? Better yet, how do I change it? It is not as easy as keeping my mouth shut because biting my tongue is painful and repressing my emotions sometimes leads to an explosion that comes at others out of nowhere. Finally, when I begin to focus the concept of the dam broke. I gathered awareness about my attitude and how often I choose to catastrophize and grumble about my circumstances, big or small, rather than get excited and accept the challenge as well as make an effort to stay in the now, embrace the opportunity to do something I enjoy. I'm going to share with you an example of how I put this into place. So I enjoy kayaking. I've been kayaking for over 10 years now. And last year during the pandemic, we bought a tandem kayak. And this was our first attempt, my spouse and I, to go out on the water together. And for some reason that day, I really wasn't having anything of it. But I kept trying to keep my mouth shut, bite my tongue. I wanted to be sure that, I wouldn't ruin the day, that my catastrophic thinking wouldn't put a damper on what could be a really beautiful experience and a connection with God, my husband, and nature. So here's a glimpse of what I was thinking when we headed out that day. Oh, I'll get caught up in the rain. What a disaster. Listening to his ongoing chattering is hard. Not knowing the way is hard. Taking this slope down to the river is hard. Getting into the water and then the kayak is hard. Trying to paddle in the same direction is hard. Luckily, I chose not to speak these thoughts out loud and silently prayed for an intervention so that I could keep putting into practice what I had learned and embrace an attitude of gratitude and excitement. Not excitement at creating chaos, not excitology at my codependencies, but genuine excitement, having permission to have joy and have fun in my life. If you ever want to challenge your thinking and your attitude and know who is in control, get into a tandem kayak with your spouse. Here, communication, patience, and grace are key. Working with each other instead of against each other is critical. There was no room for my irritability, self-centeredness, need to be right, or warden's voice. Even my husband's frustration was left at the shoreline. It was a glorious unfolding. As I reflected on the roots of my attitude and misgivings, I found it difficult to put into words why I had this learned behavior of seeing life, events, and people as hard. Time and time again, this mind trap has set me up for a negative feedback loop. Yet I still can't put my heart on the root cause of it. Clearly, I self-sabotage a fun and good time, as you can tell from my thinking. Clearly, I prefer to be in control of everything. Yet neither of these mindsets serves me, and still they cling to me like a wet rag. Time for another reality check. Despite these mindsets, I have hope for change as I learned a few things from this experience. The root of my toxic thinking is about how I feel about myself, not others. Although these words were penned by Melissa Maimon, author of Radiant Midnight, they aptly put into words my own feelings. I feel ashamed that I so easily fail at being the person I want to be. And realizing how little control I have over my mind is terrifying. All of it makes me feel vulnerable and naked. Secondly, it's never too late to change my attitude or start a new practice. God's mercies are new every morning. Lastly, pausing before I speak goes a long way to decreasing regret and guilt and the need to ask for forgiveness later. The practical way to pause is to pause before judging, pause before assuming, pause before accusing, pause whenever I'm about to react harshly. This way I can avoid doing and saying things that I will later regret. I also ask these following clarifying questions. These help me to remember to pause and ask before I lash out in anger. What is the motive of my heart? Is this my opinion or an observation? Is it beneficial to share it now or later? Do I need to let it go? Do I turn it over to God and wait on his timing and intervention? If you need help with pauses, and I know we've heard this before in this group, thepauseapp.com is an amazing prompt to release everyone and everything to God. Even though I've been participating in Life Lab since 2018, the start of my recovery really came about 19 months ago today. That is the day our world started changing drastically due to the global pandemic. What started as a 4-week lockdown turned into months, and you all know the rest. It is at this time that I started my recovery journey. I committed to taking the steps needed to heal from betrayal trauma experienced as a result of my husband's addiction. We chose to stay together for good. From that day forward, I committed to heal, let go, learn, set boundaries, and grow, change, and be transformed. I chose to support instead of enable, encourage instead of emancipate, and be a godly helpmate instead of a controlling nag. Forgiving each other's weaknesses and lifting each other up as one against the schemes of our spiritual enemy. I became willing to end an ineffective life of controlling and chaos, of vacillating from rescuer to victim to prosecutor and back again. There is such a thing as being an unhealthy caretaker, and I started looking to be free from the burdens of others that I had taken on as my own at the expense of my own well-being. Sorry. This involved letting go of codependent relationships, younger family members, former high school friends, former work colleagues. I recognized that the enemy assaulted me with shame repeatedly as I filtered all my interactions through shame, believing the enemy's lie that I don't matter. I am unlovable. I am unworthy, and I'm not good enough. I committed to responding differently as I chose to surrender my outbursts and reactions to God, trusting that He is always in control and has the best outcome planned for my husband and I. Then in February 2021, we declared war against addiction and our spiritual enemy. This is the letter that I wrote to addiction, codependency, compulsions, and my spiritual enemy. I'm here to tell you what's what and to reclaim what belongs to us as children of God. Today, we are declaring war against your schemes. Where you dig up fear, we will plant faith. Where you dig up shame, we will plant grace, mercy, and compassion. When you dig up temptation, we will plant vulnerability, love, and kindness. When you dig up doubt, deception, and denial, we will plant devotion, determination, and discipleship. Where you dig up strife and discord, we will plant harmony. When you dig up lust, we will plant love. Where you dig up darkness, we will plant light. Indeed, because we have chosen to bring you to the light, your power over us has been snuffed out. Because of your schemes, some of us believed we were victims. From this day forward, we are choosing to be victorious and live each moment being present in the victory God has assured us. Because of you, we have bought into the lies of our dependencies and compulsions. Because of your schemes, we believed we needed to raise our shield against the world and protect you from others, allowing you only to feed our disease. From this day forward, we are choosing healing and growth, as well as love, hope, and prayer in our relationships with our brothers and sisters and those in our community who have yet to know Jesus. By God's grace, we are and will remain steadfast despite your schemes, because while you continue to wage the battle against us, we believe the war has already been won by the sacrificial and unconditional love of God. One final reality check. Well, maybe two. Recovery works. It's simple, but it's not easy. It requires courage, strength, and willingness to search our hearts and rid ourselves of anything that is preventing us from connecting with God. If I look back at this time last year, my husband and I were tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Now all that is gone. We were both afflicted by spiritual malady and now are more connected than ever to God first and each other. Despite navigating through a father's dementia, a mother's Parkinson's, a sister's bipolar disorder, and the loss of another sister to suicide, God has remained faithful. His power strengthens us and causes us to work together for the good of our family. Hope is rising again as our losses are only temporary and a great restoration is coming for us. From here, I'm going to join a 12-step group. Last month, I thanked God for the gift of willingness He granted me when I accepted my desire token, a desire for full recovery, the willingness to surrender my will, go to meetings, find a sponsor, use the tools, follow a plan of eating, and keep coming back to this Zoom room recovery, taking it one day at a time. God's will, not mine, be done. So now I ask you, where are you going to go from here? What is your reality check?